Welcome to the show where we break down the mental health stigma, navigate sobriety with humor, and prove that it's okay to laugh while you heal. Let's get real, let's get honest, and maybe a little weird. Growth is messy, but you don't have to do it alone. This is Sober Psychology. Hello, gorgeous people. Welcome back. Episode 4, Part 2. We're coming at you. Last episode, we went into the setup of the higher power, gave you an explanation of what that's going to look like, told you that we're coming out of the big book right now. Maybe later we're going to do an episode where we're coming out of the Bible. I'm waiting to kind of see everybody's responses. I got a great response from this last episode, so we're going to keep going with it. This is an overview, an explanation of how the big book sees the concept of a higher power, but also this is from my own experience. This is the way that I was able to completely reconnect with God on a level that I've never seen or understood before in my life. And as I said in the last episode, the reason that I'm sober is because of God. The reason that I am living the way that I'm living now, have what I have, am able to do what I'm able to do is only by the grace, the strength, the mercy of God. Now, going back, just a quick recap, we went over pages 44. We didn't get through a lot because I blabbered on and on, but we went through page 44, 45, 46, and 47 of the big book. So we have 10 more pages to go. But we pretty much got to the point in understanding that you don't have to have a huge definition or explanation of a higher power. You just have to have the willingness at first of accepting the fact that there is something out there greater than me. One of the sayings that my sponsor said whenever I was in rehab was that I know this. I know that there is a God and I'm not it. That's all you need to know at the beginning. It goes on and on in the big book to just explain to you that a lot of people entering into a program or entering into faith at the beginning of the concept of faith or the practice of faith or the idea of faith, no one really knows what's going on. We're confused. We have a lot of prejudice against other people who are believers. We have a lot of preconceived notions. But all of this is getting us to a point of just being willing to accept. I just accept that there is something out there bigger than me, that has more power than me, an ultimate designer of everything, if you will, the supreme being of the universe, whatever it is, and however you want to conceptualize it, just getting to that willingness, that is your cornerstone in all of this, right? This massive structure that is faith, this structure that is a relationship with God. There is a reason that Christianity has survived as long as it has, and I'm a believer of that. You go back and look at history and it gets very muddled, it can get very confusing, but the reality is that I believe that God exists, and I know that I am not God, and that's all I need to do. And some days that's all I have to hold on to. I think that once you get into the faith, it's now your responsibility to start learning and figure out more and more. That comes from praying. That comes from paying attention to what God puts into your life. That comes from reading the Bible. I mean, the Bible is a way to learn God's character, right? That becomes your responsibility once you choose to follow God. It's realizing I'm going to keep learning and growing. I'm going to mess up. How am I going to bounce back? Am I going to do it on my own? Am I going to rely on this power that I say that exists? But that cornerstone is your willingness to get to that point and say, all right, I realize that there is something out there greater than me. So that's basically what we went through. I'll go back over what I said yesterday, but your disconnect from God is because of your lack of humility to change what he's bringing to your attention. That's another thing to keep in the back of your mind when we're going through this. We say all the time that, we don't see miracles and we don't believe in miracles and God's not real because this, and this happens. But what we're not paying attention to is what happens on a daily basis. If you're like me, and you're a first-time parent or you have kids already, or like for me, I have a kid on the way. if you can go through that whole process to one, see your wife and what she has to battle through and see how you don't understand how she's not coming off the rails. And then to see a child born. I mean, women are aliens, man. Like to have a child born, to have a human born from another human, to see that whole process and then to not believe, it scares me. And that's why I've said, again, I have friends who are atheists. I have good conversations with people who are atheists. But I have a hard time understanding that mentality that you have where everything is just hopeless. And that's what it is apart from God. Apart from God, everything is hopeless. God is hope. There is hope. There's hope in eternal life. There's hope in the good and the reality and the grace and the mercy and everything that encompasses what the Holy Spirit is. That's a tough spot to get to. It scares a lot of people off. And I get that. It scared me off too. So without further ado, we're going to continue to chip away at it because the words that are coming from Bill here, they were very moving. They were very influential to me, and I don't know a better way to do it, honestly. Again, depending on how we get a response from this, or just feeling if I get to a point where I feel led to, maybe we'll come out of the Bible with it. I do have a Bible verse that we will read, but right now we're coming out of the big book. This is me giving you my experience from this. So here we go. Besides a seeming inability to accept much on faith, we often found ourselves handicapped by obstinacy, which is just being stubborn, sensitiveness, and unreasoning prejudice. Many of us have been so touchy that even casual reference to spiritual things made us bristle with antagonism. I told you last episode that Bill is just all about words, and I think half the time Bill writes certain words a certain way to make himself feel special, which again is why I didn't go with show notes on this, because I'm way too much like Bill W. from the big book, right? But this is what we talked about too. How many times do you hear someone talk about God, or you hear them express their faith or give a testimony or whatnot, and you just have this this antagonizing pull at you, right? And this is what conviction is like. I do this all the time. If I know that I'm not drawing close to God, I'm doing something wrong, or I'm thinking the wrong way, I'm lusting, I'm lying, I'm whatever it is, and then I start hearing about God, like I start to just get this uneasy, uncomfortable feeling. And I think for me, at least, that's a level of conviction, right? God is perfect. God is holy. God is the example, the standard, and anything apart from that is sinful. God understands that we are humans and therefore we will sin. So he's not telling you to be perfect. He's telling you to draw close to him. So, I'm not big on necessarily believing that I have to go talk to a priest. I think that kind of defeats the idea of Jesus. So for me, that veil was broken. That veil was torn. So I can now have direct communication with God. So when I'm sinning, how am I humbling myself? When I screw up, am I going to God with this, or am I just white knuckling it? Am I just clenching my teeth and saying, I'll be fine? And those consequences may not be like your roof is going to cave in on you. It may not be that a lightning bolt's going to hit you when you're walking out in the street, but it's going to tear your soul apart slowly but surely. So that's what that bristle with antagonism is like, right? And it's pure, like it says here, where we found ourselves handicapped by obstinacy, sensitiveness, and unreasoning prejudice. I don't want to listen to your Christian jargon because I know that what I'm doing in life is wrong, and I'm not humble enough to admit it, nor am I humble enough I lack the humility to be able to bring that to God's feet. I'm going to figure it out. I'll go buy a new truck. That'll make me feel better. I'll yell at my spouse. That'll make me feel better. I'll snap at my kids. That'll fix the problem. And these are all the twisted mentalities that we have. It's apart from God, right? This sort of thinking had to be abandoned, which is just never going back to it. Though some of us resisted, we found no great difficulty in casting aside such feelings. Faced with alcoholic destruction, we soon became as open-minded on spiritual matters as we had tried to be on other questions. In this respect, alcohol was a great persuader. It finally beat us into a state of reasonableness. Sometimes this was a tedious process. We hope no one will be prejudiced for as long as some of us were. And it says, if you've ever read the Screw Tape Letters, It's a fascinating perspective on how demons work, and how I believe the devil works. The devil works not in some huge event. It's not some catastrophic, crazy thing. It's in the subtle delays. It's the devil works in these ways where he can divert your attention a little bit more away from your higher power, right? And so, like for me, it was much easier at that time, I thought, for me to go to the bottle, to get to the bottle to distract myself. I'm mad at myself. I hate myself. I'm torn up because I've been doing something wrong. I've been mistreating somebody, been lying to somebody. I'm holding back all of these truths. And so the best way for me to handle that is to just go get blackout drunk, and you remain in that state. I mean, right there towards the end, before I went into rehab, before I moved out to where I'm at now, I was drunk almost every hour that I was awake. I at least remained in a state of being, tipsy, buzzed, whatever. But I never stopped, and I hated myself so much because instead of going to God and saying, "God, take this from me. I don't have the power to handle this," I would just try and hold it all in and deal with it myself. And I didn't do it very well, obviously. And you can look at my criminal record and figure that out. The reader may still ask why he should believe in a power greater than himself. We think there are good reasons. Let us have a look at some of them. The practical individual of today is a stickler for facts and results. Nevertheless, the 20th century readily accepts theories of all kinds, provided they are firmly founded in fact. That sounds like us today. Like, unless you can prove it, it's not real. We're going to think scientifically. We can't ever think on a realm beyond that. We have numerous theories, for example, about electricity. Everybody believes them without a murmur of doubt. Why this ready acceptance? Simply because it is impossible to explain what we see, feel, direct, and use without reasonable assumption as a starting point. So for me, this is like flipping on a light switch, right? Like, I know that I'm going to go and flip on a light switch, and electricity is going to course through all the wiring, and then lights are going to come on. The room is going to be lit up, right? So I have this blind faith of accepting the fact that electricity works, therefore there will be lights. There will be something that gets ignited from this, all right? So we have faith that the lights will come on, but when it comes to God, we think we need the facts and the proof. What if every single time you went to flip on a light switch, you needed to know exactly how that worked? You needed to know the chemical composition and the equation to be able to understand how those filaments light up to be able to ignite the bulb. You need to know how long that bulb is going to stay on. You need to know where that electricity is coming from in order for it to pull from a source so you could flip that switch and activate it through the wire. It just gets to be maddening. And that's how we think. That's how I think. And that's what I struggle with a lot too, right? So I get to this point of having to prove every single thing. I'm trying to micromanage everything in my life, as opposed to just having the blind faith of flipping on the switch. I know it's going to work. Bingo. We do this with God all the time. If I have the faith of accepting the fact that God is out there, that if I'm praying to God, if I'm laying down my life, then something is going to happen internally. And this is a hard concept with God because we treat God like a genie in a bottle, right? I've done this so much, and we bargain with God. How many of you are like, "God, just take this away, and I promise you I'll go to church. Just take this away, and I promise I'll read the Bible. Just help me out, making this mortgage, and then I promise you everything will be good. Just take this sickness away from this relative who's dying, and I swear that I'll start following you." That's not how God works. God doesn't bargain or barter with us. God is God. He created us in his image, and he is in you, one way or the other, whether you believe it or not. As much as you try and push God away, he's still there. So this blind faith in the reality of accepting the fact that, God, I'm going to do what you asked. I don't know what I need. How would I ever know what I need, right? God knows what I need. That's a hard place to get to, but it's so much easier to live life that way. I drive a 2005 Chevy Silverado. The thing is breaking down. I'm pouring money into it every month, and I need a new truck. Do I need a new truck? Is that priority number one? I got a kid on the way. I'm in school. I'm bouncing around from employment just trying to make ends meet. I don't need a new truck. But if I tell God what I need, that's going to be on the priority list, right? It's not what I need. What I need is freedom from myself. God knows this. What I need is to be able to be a husband who's worthy of leading his wife, who's worthy of raising his child to be a disciple. That's what I need. That's not very tangible. That's a hard thing to ask for or to understand or accept that that's what I need, because that's not going to satisfy me personally as a human. I want what I want, and I want it now, right? So we have to have this blind faith, like flipping on the light bulb. I don't need to know why the light bulb works. I don't need to know about the electricity. I don't need to know any of that. I just need to know that I'm going to flip the switch. There we go. It's on. And that was our cornerstone we talked about yesterday. Everybody nowadays believes in scores of assumptions for which there is good evidence, but no perfect visual proof. And does not science demonstrate that visual proof is the weakest proof? It is being constantly revealed as mankind studied the material world that outward appearances are not inward reality at all. To illustrate, the prosaic steel girder is a mass of electrons whirling around each other at an incredible speed. These tiny bodies are governed by precise laws, and these laws hold true throughout the material world. Science tells us so. We have no reason to doubt it. When, however, the perfectly logical assumption is suggested that underneath the material world and life as we see it, there is an all-powerful guiding creative intelligence there, right there, our preserve streak comes to the surface, and we laboriously set out to convince ourselves it isn't so. We read wordy books and indulge in windy arguments, thinking we believe this universe needs no God to explain it. Here we go. Were our contentions true, it would follow that life originated out of nothing, means nothing, and proceeds nowhere. Hopelessness exists without God. And this is typically what you're going to find with people who are atheists. They're very scientifically minded, because I need proof to believe it. But if you can prove it, then it's not powerful and it doesn't mean anything. And it's just this constant cycle of arguing against what's real. Okay. And so this is what it was talking about. Like, this is going back to the early 1900s. This is not a new concept. I know it, what we're dealing with now, like we're becoming adults, or we are adults, and we've seen things, and like we're realizing how disconnected this world is from God in general. And it may even be for you personally that you've felt so disconnected from God. Well, I've obtained everything I want without God. Have you? Really? Like, if you really go take a look at it. But we get to this constant cycle of having to disprove and having to prove against. And then when we get the answer based on the proof that we found, it's still not enough, because now it's weak and we can poke holes in that too. And so this is a constant thinking. Were our contentions true, it would follow that life originated out of nothing, means nothing, and proceeds nowhere. It's a very hopeless feeling, and it's a very hopeless reality. And I know what it's like to be there, and it's a very dark place. Instead of regarding ourselves as intelligent agents, spearheads of God's over-advancing creation, we agnostics and atheists chose to believe that our human intelligence was the last word, the alpha and the omega, the beginning and the end of it all. Rather vain of us, wasn't it? That's just Bill highlighting to you that how small are you as a human being? You exist at such a small point on a timeline. Your name will be forgotten hundreds of years from now. Sure, maybe you did some good. Maybe you did some things, you felt altruistic or whatnot. But to think that you have control over the universe, to think that you can control anything is very arrogant. And we do this all the time. I do this all the time. Even as a Christian, even as someone who's practicing the faith constantly, I still am agnostic in my faith. There are so many times where I think I can figure it out before God can, or I've got the best solution. And that's just not it. That's not a smart way to operate. I mean, that's a very arrogant and small-minded way to exist. We who have traveled this dubious path beg you to lay aside your prejudice, even against organized religion. We have learned that whatever the human frailties of various faiths may be, those faiths have given purpose and direction to millions. People of faith have a logical idea of what life is all about. Actually, we used to have no reasonable conception whatever. We used to amuse ourselves by cynically dissecting spiritual beliefs and practices when we might have observed that many spiritually minded persons of all races, colors, and creeds were demonstrating a degree of stability, happiness, and usefulness which we should have sought ourselves. That's a very hard reality. That's a very big pill to swallow, because typically we're mad at Christians because they're happy. Now, Christians are sinners. They are not better than anybody else. They are hypocrites. We are hypocrites. But they're able to operate in a manner of a faith higher than themselves. They're able to believe in something that's beyond this life right now. And so you see Christians who tend to be, more often than not, people with religion, not just Christians, but people with religion and belief in a higher power. They tend to be happier because there's more stability in that mentality. And it's like we said yesterday, like that belief in a higher power is a pro-social shift. If I'm thinking of a higher power, there's a pro-social shift in my mind that now gets me to a point where I'm believing in, or I'm seeing others. I'm others oriented now, right? Because I know that there's more than just me in this world. I know that I exist for more than just serving myself. And so that others oriented mentality from that pro-social shift of mindset, it allows there to be more stability. It allows there to be, like, even if it's just with your wife and your children and your friends and your family or people that are just close to you, you start to view the world differently because there are things out there more important than myself. This is the very top of page 50. And as we said yesterday, the whole theme of this podcast, the design work around it, is from this verse that we're about to read, and we'll dig into it. Instead, we looked at the human defects of these people and sometimes use their shortcomings as a basis of wholesale condemnation. That's basically just saying what most of us have experienced. If you're such a super Christian, then why did you cuss? If you're such a super Christian, why did you cheat on your wife? If you're such a super Christian, why, like, it's easy to go, because we're humans and everybody screws up and everybody is flawed and everybody struggles with things. I am proud to say that I'm a Christian. I'm a believer. I have faith. I'm also an alcoholic addict. I'm also someone who has a track record. I also have a domestic violence history. I'm also someone who has been a monster, but that's not who I am. That's what I chose to do, right? And that was apart from God, because when I'm tracking with God, when I'm constantly seeking Him, I don't do those things. I think of others before myself. I put others' needs before my own. And that's a different shift, but it's easy to say that I'm a Christian. That agitates someone. We bristle with antagonism when we hear someone talking about God, and then you're waiting for them to mess up. I'm gonna prove to you that you're a fraud, right? We talked of intolerance while we were intolerant ourselves. We're all hypocrites. Here it is. We missed the reality and the beauty of the forest because we were diverted by the ugliness of some of its trees. That is the whole purpose of this prejudice mindset. That's the whole purpose of breaking this stigma. We missed the reality and the beauty of the forest because we were diverted by the ugliness of some of its trees. We see these scary trees, these ominous trees, the silhouettes, and it's scary, it's terrifying. Some of the trees are ugly and gnarled, and some of them are split and broken, and we think to ourselves, that's terrible. Who would ever want to be a part of that? But then what you don't realize is that forest is beautiful. You're missing the reality of it. You're missing the beauty of it. This is nature. This is life. This is something that's constantly given. This is the home to so many animals. This is creating oxygen for us to be able to breathe. This is God's creation. But just because of a couple of trees that were ugly, we're going to immediately say that it's pointless. And that's what we do as human beings, looking at other people who have a different belief system than us. I'm not going to say that being a Christian is right. Of course, I believe that. But who's to say that Buddha wasn't real? I don't know. I have faith that my God is real. I have faith in what the Bible says. I have faith in my experiences that God is real. Okay. But that doesn't mean that just because I get to look at someone else who's a Christian and they do something wrong, I immediately say that your God is terrible. Your God sucks. Your God's not real. That's what this is talking about. We are selfish, we're judgmental, and we're mean. And that's just a natural human condition. And that's learned, by the way. We learned to become that way, right? We missed the reality and the beauty of the forest because we were diverted by the ugliness of some of its trees. We never gave the spiritual side of life a fair hearing. This is going back to our willingness. This is the cornerstone of our faith, just the willingness. In our personal stories, you will find a wide variation in the way each teller approaches and conceives of the power which is greater than himself. Whether we agree with a particular approach or conception seems to make little difference. Experience has taught us that these matters about which, for our purpose, we need not be worried. They are questions for each individual to settle for himself. On one proposition, however, these men and women are strikingly agreed. Every one of them has gained access to and believes in a power greater than themselves. This power has, in each case, accomplished the miraculous, the humanly impossible. As a celebrated American statesman put it, let's look on the record. Here are thousands of men and women, worldly indeed. They flatly declare that since they have come to believe in a power greater than themselves, to take a certain attitude toward that power, and to do certain simple things, there has been a revolutionary change in their way of living and thinking. In the face of collapse and despair, in the face of the total failure of their human resources, they found that a new power, peace, happiness, and sense of direction flowed into them. This happened soon after they wholeheartedly met a few simple requirements. Once confused and baffled by the seeming futility of existence, they showed the underlying reasons why they were making heavy going of life. This is where we're constantly doing all of this on our own. We're constantly trying to figure it out by ourselves. And this is telling you that people have experienced this. This isn't telling you it's a hypothetical. This is real experience. There are people who realize that there's a power greater than themselves, and they wholeheartedly pursued that, and it changed their lives. That's a 5-star Amazon review. That's a guarantee. That's not maybe this works or this works for me and won't work for you. That's a guarantee for multiple people with different stories, with different viewpoints, with all different type of prejudice mentalities. It works, right? Leaving aside the drink question, they tell why living was so unsatisfactory. They show how the change came over them. When many hundreds of people were able to say that the consciousness of the presence of God is today the most important fact in their lives, they present a powerful reason why one should have faith. One of the things that I heard before I got into rehab was that AA is like a cult. And I believe it's because of the higher power mentality. This is not forcing a view of God on you. This is just telling you that this doesn't work without God. And if you talk to a recovered addict alcoholic that has any length in sobriety, they will tell you that there is no other reason that they are sober other than the grace of God, leaning into God, leaning into their higher power, right? This is real. It's tangible. This is it. It put it in a book. It's in the Bible. There's so many people, thousands of men and women who have recovered from a seemingly hopeless state of mind and body. That's a guarantee. This world of ours has made more material progress in the last century than in all the millenniums which went before. Almost everyone knows the reason. Students of ancient history tell us that the intellect of men in those days was equal to the best of today. Yet in ancient times, material progress was painfully slow. The spirit of modern scientific inquiry, research, and invention was almost unknown. In the realm of the material, men's minds were fettered by superstition, tradition, and all sorts of fixed ideas. Some of the contemporaries of Columbus thought a round earth preposterous. Others came near putting Galileo to death for his astronomical heresies. We think that we have it figured out because we have all these technological advancements. We're still doing that today. Look at all the advancements in science. Look at all of the craziness that exists, things that we thought were impossible. We miss miracles because we're used to seeing wonderful things happening. How did we get to that point? How did those things happen in general? How is someone equipped to be able to save lives? How is someone equipped to be able to build machinery that can change the world? We overlook all of this because we think that we have it all figured out. We asked ourselves this: are not some of us just as biased and unreasonable about the realm of the spirit as were the ancients about the realm of the material? That's a pretty cool point too. Like, imagine being someone in ancient Egyptian times. I mean, they still have, what is it, the Mecca for is it the Muslims, that stone that fell from the sky thousands and thousands of years ago, and then they ended up putting it as a sacred, and I mean that's what Muhammad delivered to this artifact basically, right? And that's like the house of God. And you can look that up. You're probably going to need to fact check me on that. But I mean, think of the gods that were created from ancient civilizations. It was from thunder. It was from lightning. It was from, these sky fires. It was from all of this stuff that we saw that like now we're so numb to when we see, because we're used to seeing it. We live in an age of YouTube. Everything's recorded. But back then, I mean, when you have a torrential downpour, they created a god for that, right? Certain Native American tribes had a turtle god, and that was what they called on for the rain, right? So it's this reality of wonderment. It's the same concept as ancient civilizations being able to master material. We have this we need to have this wonderment for being able to accept who God is, right? Like this wonderment is the hardest part about this. Even in the present century, American newspapers were afraid to print an account of the Wright brothers' first successful flight at Kitty Hawk. Had not all efforts at flight failed before? Did not Professor Langley's flying machine go to the bottom of the Potomac River? Was it not true that the best mathematical minds had proved man could never fly? Had not people said God had reserved this privilege to the birds? Only 30 years later, the conquest of the air was almost an old story, and airplane travel was in full swing. I mean, everything that we have ever said is impossible. It ends up becoming true. We figure it out, whatever, through the advancements of science and technology and control of materials. And we sit here and say, oh gosh, I can't believe it happened. 10 years ago, 20 years ago, we were saying this wasn't true, or this could never happen. This is impossible. I watched the fastball documentary, and the fastest fastball pitcher back in the 20s and 30s threw like 92 miles an hour. And then you have, someone like Nolan Ryan come into, in the 70s and 80s, and the dude's 44 years old, still throwing 96. He at one point is said to have thrown close to 110. Like, how far can we push the limits? This used to be impossible, but now it's not. Who are we to say that something's impossible? Right? It's hard for us to accept a higher power because we see impossible feats accomplished in our lifetimes. We believe that we'll figure it out. It's this arrogance, right? And that's part of the issue with free will, right? We were allowed to believe that we are gods. We're not. But in most fields, our generation has witnessed complete liberation of our thinking. Show any longshoreman a Sunday supplement describing a proposal to explore the moon by means of a rocket, and he will say, I bet they do it. Maybe not so long either. Is not our age characterized by the ease with which we discard old ideas for new? By the complete readiness with which we throw away the theory or gadget which does not work for something new which does? We had to ask ourselves why we shouldn't apply to our human problems the same readiness to change our point of view. We were having trouble with personal relationships. We couldn't control our emotional natures. We were prey to misery and depression. We couldn't make a living. We had a feeling of uselessness. We were full of fear. We were unhappy. We couldn't seem to be of real help to other people. Was not a basic solution of these bedevilments more important than whether we should see newsreels of lunar flight? Of course it was. When we saw others solve their problems by a simple reliance upon the spirit of the universe, we had to stop doubting the power of God. Our ideas did not work, but the God idea did. And this is the end of the rope that we all tend to get to. Nothing's working. I can't communicate with my wife. I can't get people to understand. I can't find a way to love myself. I'm depressed. I'm miserable. I'm scared of everything, whatever the case may be. And then we get to this point of accepting the fact that there is a God. I'm not it. I'm going to lean into this spirit of the universe. Then we start to see a change in our problems in the same way that people said that it's impossible to fly. And then the Wright brothers said, bet, hold my beer, watch this happen. The Wright brothers' almost childish faith that they could build a machine which could fly was the mainspring of their accomplishment. Without that, nothing could have happened. We agnostics and atheists were sticking to the idea that self-sufficiency would solve our problems. When others showed us that God's sufficiency worked with them, we began to feel like those who had insisted the Wright brothers could never fly. We get to this mentality that it's never going to work. We're the cynics, we're the bad people, but yet the Wright brothers are here taking flight. Right. And let's go to this childish faith from the Wright brothers. And that's from Matthew 18:3 in the Bible, which says, truly, I say to you, unless you turn and become like children, you will never enter the kingdom of heaven. Whomever humbles himself like this child is the greatest in the kingdom of heaven. It's this wonderment, this acceptance. Think about how a kid looks at his father. A kid looks at his father, especially when they're younger. My dad can do no wrong. My dad is perfect. My dad is Superman. My dad is incredible. They don't have a disbelief in you. You know your limitations because you've gone through life experiencing failure. Your kid doesn't think that you can fail. Now, I don't think it's healthy to make your or to allow your kid to think that you're Superman for the rest of your life, whatever, but it's the concept of accepting that there's so many people out there that thought the Wright brothers would. You know how many people did not think that we were ever going to go to the moon? And maybe we didn't. That's a conspiracy. We can get into that another day, whatever. But we constantly limit ourselves, and then we limit other people because it's hard for us to accept, to have the faith of accepting that something can actually happen that's good from all of this, right? Logic is great stuff. We liked it. We still like it. It is not by chance we were given the power to reason, to examine the evidence of our senses, and to draw conclusions. That is one of man's magnificent attributes. We agnostically inclined would not feel satisfied with a proposal which does not lend itself to reasonable approach and interpretation. Hence, we are at pains to tell why we think our present faith is reasonable, why we think it is more sane and logical to believe than not to believe, why we say our former thinking was soft and mushy when we threw up on our hands in doubt and said we don't know. Here's one of, I love this little passage because it just shows you the all or nothing mentality. God is everything or he's nothing. That's where you have to get to, right? That has changed my life. Every single thing that happens is God. It's because of God. It is God, whatever the case may be. And then I get to this point of accepting the fact that I'm literally a spiritual being having a human experience, okay? When we became alcoholics, crushed by a self-imposed crisis, we could not postpone or evade. We had to fearlessly face the proposition that either God is everything or else he is nothing. God either is or he isn't. What was our choice to be? Unfortunately, for a lot of people, it takes getting at the end of your rope. It takes getting to the very end of all of your nonsense. For me, it took criminal charges, multiple times in jail, hurting some of the people that I loved the most, becoming a monster that I absolutely abhorred. It took getting to that point of finally breaking to get to where I could accept the fact that God's everything or he's nothing. God cannot be a portion. He cannot be a part. It can't just be simple conversations. Oh, that's God. It's everything. I do not have control over my blood flowing through my veins. I do not have control over the air filling my lungs. I wake up every morning. One of the things I learned from a men's Bible study a long time ago, I heard a guy say this, and because I was prejudiced, this was back before I got sober, because I was so prejudiced and I was so mad at Christians for being happy, I got so mad that he would say, his name is Max James, and just a good dude. But the way that he used to pray, he would say, God, thank you for letting me wake up today and draw breath. And what a humbling exercise. What a cool spot to be in where you just accept the fact that I'm drawing breath today because God allowed it, right? This is part of going back to, I think, with Western Western theology and how our Western culture views the church. We don't fear God enough. It's scary to fear God. It should be. Like, I draw breath because of God. I take one foot and put it in front of the other and keep moving about my day because of God. God allows that because he can choose not to allow that. But this is that mentality that God's everything or he's nothing, right? This is getting to your wit's end and having nothing and then realizing that the only way that I'm going to be built back up, the only way I'm going to be able to operate through this life in a manner where I'm happy, joyous, and free, where I find that level of serenity, where no matter what's going on, I'm still here. Everything could be falling apart, but I'm still okay. That's hard to get to, but that's because I accept the fact that God is everything. All right. I told y'all we're going to do 3 parts to this. We're almost done with this chapter. Hang in there with me. I appreciate all of your responses on the videos. People watching the videos, people sharing the videos, people liking the videos, whether it be the shorts, whether it just be reaching out through email. You guys are awesome. I mean, I don't know where this is going to go. In the very first episode, we talked about where I want this podcast to be and how I want it to grow. And it may change. That may be completely different in 2-3 years. I don't know. But we're going to stay consistent with it because this is helping me too, a lot. I struggle every day and I'm not perfect. And this is a great way for me to not only be able to reconnect with God in a different way, but to connect with all of you. So love you guys. As always, thank you for the support. We're going to continue doing it. Follow me on socials or reach out to me on socials. You don't even have to follow me. You can just reach out. Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, email, whatever. But we're going to be posting videos every Wednesday. We're going to be putting shorts out every day if we can. You guys are great. I'm always here for you. As always, keep your head up, keep your heart open, go help somebody.